The rain had been falling since morning, making the streets shine like silver under the streetlights. It was a cold evening, the kind that made people walk fast with their heads down, eager to get home. Inside the small diner on the corner, the air was warm, filled with the smell of coffee and fresh bread. The waitress moved from table to table, wiping counters, serving food, and refilling cups of tea for the few customers who had come in to escape the weather. That's when she noticed him. He was sitting by the window, his jacket soaked through, his hair wet from the rain. He looked older than he probably was, with tired eyes and rough hands that trembled slightly as he held the menu. He didn't order anything. He just sat there, staring at the pictures of food like someone who hadn't eaten a real meal in days. Other customers noticed him too. A few glanced his way with looks that weren't kind. One man even muttered something under his breath about people like that coming in from the streets. But the waitress didn't listen to them. Something about the stranger made her heart ache. Maybe it was the way he tried to look invisible, like he didn't want to bother anyone. Or maybe it was the way his eyes followed every plate of food that passed by. She walked over with a smile. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked softly. The man looked up, almost surprised someone was speaking to him kindly. "No, thank you," he said in a quiet voice. I'm fine." But he didn't look fine. He looked hungry, cold, and tired in a way that went beyond just needing sleep. She went back to the counter, thinking about what to do. He clearly didn't have money, or he would have ordered something by now. The manager might not like it if someone sat there too long without buying anything. She glanced at the tip jar. There was only a little in there, but she didn't care. She reached into her own pocket, pulled out a few crumpled bills, and handed them to the cook. "Give him the warmest meal we have," she whispered. "Don't tell him I paid." The cook raised an eyebrow but nodded. A few minutes later, a steaming plate of soup, bread, and hot coffee was placed in front of the man. The stranger looked confused. "I didn't order this," he said softly. The waitress smiled from across the room, but didn't say a word. "Someone else told him. The lady over there took care of it." For a moment, the man just sat there, staring at the food like he couldn't believe it was real. Then his hands shook as he picked up the spoon. He ate slowly at first, like someone who wasn't used to eating in front of others, then faster as the warmth filled his body. When he finished, he stood up and walked over to the counter. His eyes were wet, but not from the rain this time. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You don't know what this means to me." The waitress just smiled. "It's nothing," she replied softly. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." But he shook his head. "It's not nothing," he said firmly, like he wanted her to understand. Then he turned and left, disappearing back into the rainy night. The other customers went back to their meals. The cook shrugged. To them, it was just a simple act, nothing worth talking about, but the waitress kept thinking about it long after her shift ended. She wondered where the man would sleep that night. She wondered what his story was. She didn't expect to see him again. She had only wanted to help someone in need, to make his day a little better. She had no idea that this small act of kindness was about to change her life forever. The next day, the diner felt busier than usual. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low, and people came in for warm coffee and comfort food. The waitress moved quickly between tables, taking orders, carrying plates, and wiping counters as the little bell above the door kept ringing every time a new customer stepped in. She had almost forgotten about the man from last night, almost it was then, in the middle of her shift, that the door opened and he walked in. For a moment, she didn't even recognize him. He was wearing clean clothes, his hair combed neatly, and he didn't look like the tired, beaten-down man she had seen before. He walked differently too, his step steady, his head held higher, like someone who had found a bit of hope overnight. He scanned the room until his eyes found her. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that carried gratitude, the kind that made her pause in the middle of cleaning a table. He walked up to the counter where she stood, wiping a cup with a towel. "Hi," he said softly. His voice was clearer today, stronger somehow. "I was hoping you'd be here." The waitress nodded, feeling a little shy now that everyone in the diner was looking at them. "Hello," she said, keeping her tone warm but light. "I didn't expect to see you again." The man chuckled quietly. "I had to come back," he said, pulling something out of his coat pocket. It was a small envelope folded neatly, like it held something important. He placed it on the counter in front of her. "This is for you," he said simply. She looked at it, confused. "What is it?" "Just something I want you to read when you have time," he said. "Please." Before she could ask anything else, he nodded politely, turned, and headed for the door. "Wait," she called out, but he just smiled and waved without looking back. Then he was gone, leaving the bell above the door jingling behind him. The other waitresses gathered around the counter as she held the envelope. "What is it?" One of them whispered. "I don't know," she admitted, staring at it like it might hold some kind of secret. One of the cooks grinned from the kitchen window. "Maybe he's in love with you," he teased. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop, he's just grateful, that's all." But deep down, she felt there was something more here. She slipped the envelope into her apron pocket, deciding to wait until after her shift to open it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of clinking dishes, chatter, and steaming coffee cups. Customers came and went, laughing, eating, and living their ordinary lives. But her mind kept drifting back to the envelope and the man who had left it. Who was he really? Why had he looked so different today? And what could possibly be written inside? Finally, when the diner emptied out and her shift was over, she sat at the corner booth with a cup of coffee. Her hands felt strangely shaky as she opened the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper. On it, in neat handwriting, was a letter. As she began to read, her heart slowed, and the noise of the diner faded away. The man wrote about how her kindness the night before had done more than fill his stomach. It had given him hope at a time when he had none. He told her he had once lived a good life with a family, a business, and friends. But then tragedy struck, and he lost everything. He admitted that lately, he had been ready to give up completely. But when she paid for his meal, he felt, for the first time in years, like someone in the world still cared. It gave him the strength to make a phone call he'd been avoiding for months, a call to someone who could help him get back on his feet. At the bottom of the letter was a simple line. "You reminded me life is worth trying for again." "Thank you," she read the letter twice, then folded it carefully, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. That night, long after she left the diner, the waitress lay in bed thinking about the letter. The man's words wouldn't leave her mind. He had written about losing everything: his family, his home, his business, and how he had been walking through life feeling invisible. Like nobody cared whether he lived or not. But a small act of kindness, something as simple as paying for a meal, had stopped him from giving up completely. She kept hearing one line over and over again in her head. "You reminded me life is worth trying for again." It was strange. She had done the kind of thing people might forget the next day. Yet for him, it had meant everything. She thought about the business card tucked inside the letter. It was simple, with just a name, a phone number, and the name of a company she didn't recognize. She wondered if she should call. Maybe it was just his way of saying thank you. Or maybe there was more he wanted to say. The next day at work, she showed the letter to the cook in the back. He read it slowly, nodding as his eyes moved across the page. "This guy sounds serious," he said. "You should call." What's the worst that could happen? The waitress wasn't sure. She wasn't used to people making a big deal out of something she did. She wasn't looking for attention. She had just wanted to help someone who looked hungry. That was it. But the way he wrote, the pain in his words. It felt like there was more to the story than she knew. Later that evening, when the diner was quiet again, she sat at the corner booth with her old cell phone and the business card in front of her. She stared at the number for a long time before finally dialing. The phone rang twice before a man answered. Hello? His voice was calm, confident, nothing like the broken man she had met days before. Hi. This is the waitress from the diner, she said awkwardly. You left me a letter. There was a pause, then the man chuckled softly. I was hoping you'd call, he said. They talked for a while. He told her his name and explained how, years ago, he had owned a small but successful company. He had a wife, a house, a life people might call comfortable. But then a fire destroyed his business. His wife passed away from an illness soon after, and everything collapsed all at once. I couldn't handle it, he admitted quietly. I let everything go. I walked away from people who cared about me. I just disappeared. The waitress listened without interrupting. His voice carried so much weight, so much regret, that it felt like he had been holding this in for years. But that night at the diner, he continued, you didn't just give me food. You gave me dignity. You reminded me I wasn't just some nobody sitting in the corner, that someone still saw me. She didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected to hear all this. She had just been kind to a stranger. She never imagined it would mean this much. Before hanging up, he said something she didn't fully understand at the time. I want to repay your kindness, he told her. You'll hear from me soon. She tried to refuse, telling him it wasn't necessary, that she hadn't done it for anything in return. But he only laughed softly and said, you'll see. The next few days were quiet. She went back to her routine, serving customers, wiping tables, counting tips at the end of the night. But she couldn't stop thinking about the man's words. Then, 3 days later, something happened that left her stunned. The same man walked into the diner again, this time not in old clothes, not looking tired or beaten down, but standing tall, wearing a crisp jacket, carrying a folder in his hand. He greeted her with a smile that was full of energy, full of life. I told you I'd come back, he said. She smiled nervously. You look different, she admitted. He laughed. I feel different. Then he handed her the folder. This, he said, is for you. Open it later, when you're not busy. Before she could ask what it was, he ordered a meal, sat down like any other customer, ate quietly, and left just as calmly as before. The waitress stood there with the folder in her hands, her coworkers staring at her like she had just been given the key to a mystery. What was inside? Why was he giving it to her? She didn't know yet, but her life was about to change in ways she never expected. Asterisk, the folder sat on the counter all afternoon. Customers came and went. Coffee cups clinked, plates slid across tables. But the waitress kept glancing at it like it might hold a secret too big to open. When her shift finally ended, she carried it to the same corner booth where she had read the letter days before. Her hands felt unsteady as she flipped it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper on top. At first glance, it looked like an official letter. As she read, her eyes widened. It was a job offer. The man she had helped, the one who had come into the diner looking like he had nothing, was in the process of rebuilding his company. He explained in the letter that he was restarting slowly, carefully, but he needed trustworthy people. People with heart. People who believed in second chances, like she had believed in him, and he wanted her to join his company. The position wasn't anything fancy, an assistant at first, helping with calls, schedules, and paperwork. But the pay was more than she had ever earned waiting tables. She read the letter twice. Stunned. Her coworkers crowded around the booth as she told them what it said. Wait, one of them said, eyes wide. You mean the guy you bought soup for is actually some kind of business owner? Another shook his head in disbelief. You're telling me this man went from homeless to hiring people? The waitress didn't answer right away. Her heart felt heavy in the best way possible. She had never done anything expecting a reward, yet here was this chance to change her life handed to her because of one simple act of kindness. But there was more. At the bottom of the letter, written in neat handwriting, were words that made her throat tighten. You gave me a reason to stand up again. Let me help you stand taller too. The next morning, she called the number he had left on the letter. He answered right away. I was hoping you'd call, he said, his voice warm. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say yes. He told her gently. I meant every word. You were there when I had nothing. Let me be here for you now. She hesitated. Her life had been the same for so long: early mornings, long hours, small tips, tired feet at the end of the night. The diner felt safe because it was familiar. But part of her knew she couldn't stay there forever. I'm not qualified for something like this, she said softly. You're more qualified than you think, he replied. Skills can be taught. Kindness can't. That's why I want you on my team. The words stayed with her long after the call ended. 2 days later, he came to the diner again, this time to meet her properly outside of the crowded tables and ringing bell over the door. They sat together in a quiet corner, drinking coffee. As he explained his plans, he told her about the company he was rebuilding, how it had once been his pride and joy before everything fell apart. He talked about the people he was bringing back, the new ideas he had, and how he wanted to make it bigger than before. But more than that, he said, looking at her seriously, I want it to be a place where people matter, where no one feels invisible. You reminded me what that feels like. She listened quietly, unsure what to say. She had never been part of something so big, so full of possibility. When he finally asked again if she would join, she found herself nodding. Okay, she said softly, I'll do it. His smile lit up his whole face. You won't regret it, he promised. For the rest of the week, things moved quickly. She gave her notice at the diner, something she had never imagined herself doing. Her coworkers hugged her, half excited, half shocked that everything had happened so fast. On her last day, the man came in one final time to have coffee before she left the diner job behind. As they sat together, he said quietly, You'll see. This is just the beginning. Kindness has a way of coming back around. She believed him now, because even though she didn't know what her new life would look like, she knew for sure it was about to change in ways she had never dreamed of. The first day at her new job felt like stepping into a different world. For years, she had been used to the clatter of dishes, the smell of frying oil, the rush of customers coming in for their meals. The diner had been her whole life early. Mornings, long shifts, small paychecks, and tired feet by closing time. But now, as she walked into the bright, glass-walled office building, she felt both nervous and excited. The man she had once seen shivering in the rain was there waiting for her at the entrance, dressed sharply in a suit. He greeted her with a warm smile that instantly calmed her nerves. Welcome, he said softly. I'm glad you're here. He introduced her to a few people managers, assistants, secretaries. Everyone already seemed to know about her. They greeted her with smiles, and a few even whispered things like, So you're the one who helped him? She didn't know what to say. She had never liked attention, but the kindness in their voices made her feel something she hadn't felt in years, like she mattered. Her job started small, organizing files, answering calls, scheduling meetings. But she threw herself into it with the same hard work she had always given to the diner. And little by little, she learned new things: how to write reports, how to handle clients, how to manage schedules. The man often stopped by her desk, sometimes just to ask how she was adjusting, other times to talk about the company's future plans. One day, he told her, When I lost everything, I thought my life was over. But you showed me that even strangers can be the reason someone keeps going. This company, it's my second chance. And now it's yours too. His words stayed with her. Weeks passed, and she began to grow in confidence. Her coworkers admired her work ethic, and soon she was trusted with bigger responsibilities. The man himself began relying on her more and more, asking her opinion on small decisions, then bigger ones. One afternoon, he called her into his office. He said, leaning back in his chair, "I never told you this, but the night you paid for my meal, I was ready to give up, completely. I had nothing left. But your kindness, it brought me back." She sat quietly, unsure how to respond. He continued, "This company exists again because you reminded me life was worth fighting for, so whatever success comes from here on out, it's not just mine. It's yours too." She felt her throat tighten with emotion. She had never thought a simple act could ripple this far. Months later, the company began to grow quickly. New clients came in, the office expanded, and with every step forward, she moved up too. She wasn't just the girl who had once worked in a small diner anymore. She was learning skills, meeting important people, building a career she had never imagined for herself. One evening, after a long day, the man called the entire office together. He stood at the front of the room, his eyes shining with pride. "Some of you know how this all began," he said. "When I was at my lowest, one person's kindness gave me the courage to start over. Without her, none of this would exist. She believed in a stranger. And because of that, we're all here today." Then he looked directly at her. "She didn't just change my life," he said softly. "She saved it." The room filled with applause as everyone turned toward her. She felt her face flush, but she also felt something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Over time, her life transformed completely. She moved out of the tiny apartment she had lived in for years. She traveled for work sometimes, learning things she had only read about before. The company grew bigger than anyone expected, and she became one of its most trusted employees. But more than the success, more than the money or the new life, it was the friendship between her and the man that meant the most. He often said, "Kindness is never small. It always comes back around." And every time she walked into the office, every time she saw how far things had come, she knew he was right, because one rainy night, she had paid for a stranger's meal. And that single act had changed both of their lives forever.